Well, it's good to have all of you joining us today for Neighboring 101. As I mentioned earlier, I know there's other exciting holidays coming up, like National Good Neighbor Day on September 28th and Missouri Good Neighbor Week for September 28th to October 4th. But today is National Disco Day because it's the 21st of December from the Earth, Wind, and Fire song, September. So we've already had a time to celebrate that uh, during the early check-in time for everybody. But then we're at that appointed noon hour to be a good steward of your time, and so we'll get right on to business. This is session number 33 of Neighboring 101, and this is where we talk to leaders in the neighboring movement all across the United States and discover ways that organizations and individuals can impact their community through the art and skill of neighboring. If you want to access past class videos, those links are made available in the email reminder that goes out after each of these sessions and before our next session. So be sure you're subscribed and looking at those Neighboring 101 emails. Speaking of speakers, we now have speakers lined up all the way through April of 2024 with a couple of bonus speakers thrown in along the way. And in fact, we have two bonus speakers here during September because of Missouri Good Neighbor Week. And so just wanted to draw your attention to those. Again, the links for those Zoom sessions are a little different, but they have gone out to you in email. On Tuesday, September 26th at 11 a.m., we're going to have an hour-long session with Shanna Martin, who is the author of Start With Hello. And we would really benefit by you being in attendance and participating live and asking questions of Shanna and hearing her story about connecting in her neighborhood. Again, that's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, September 26th. And then on October 3rd at 10 a.m., we're going to have an opportunity to do an interview with Dr. Seth Kaplan. And he has a new book coming out called Fragile Neighborhoods. Dr. Kaplan is a lecturer at John Hopkins University, and I think you'll want to hear what he has to say, and would really encourage you to attend live and ask your questions of him as well. Well, our guest speaker today, well, I should say today's session kind of has two parts. Part B is toward the end when we're going to kind of share some of our ideas and plans for National Good Neighbor Day or Missouri Good Neighbor Week. We want to hear your ideas, and maybe we can all gain our own new ideas doing so. Time of ideas. But part A is our good friend Jennifer Prophete, who is the community development director at the Hopeful Neighborhood Project. She returns for the third and final options focused on creating a hopeful neighborhood. And today she's going to be talking about helping us understand what it means to pursue the common good in the neighborhood. So Jennifer, these have been great sessions that you've done. I've heard great feedback on them, and I'm glad you're here today to help tie it up with a pretty bow.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been fun every month, and I'm grateful to be here. I am prepared with a large coffee and a slightly sore throat. So it's not sore. It's actually just like getting better. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. I am going to go ahead and try to share my screen and see you at the same time. So let's see if I can figure this out this time.
Miraculous technology. Here we go.
Right, here we go. Okay.
Cross your fingers, everybody.
So I want to share my screen this way. And then what I want to do is set up my slideshow.
Yep.
From the beginning. And I can still see you all.
Look at that. Look at that. You've done it.
I feel like Zoom goes away when I do that, and then I'm speaking blind. And I hate that. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Some of you I know have been part of our early sessions, and some of you I believe are new. There's some new names on here. So you might have heard some of the sessions in the past couple of months by going back and watching the videos, but possibly not. So I'm going to give even if you were here, I know you're all really busy. So I'm going to spend a little time reviewing who we are and what we've been doing. Before I wrap it up with a pretty bow. So we are talking about pursuing the common good. I should have put that it was National Disco Day. I didn't know. So I didn't put it. It's on September 21st, but I will know now.
Yeah, I'll mark your calendar for next year.
Absolutely. All right. So, what is the Hopeful Neighborhood Project? We are a nonprofit that helps everyday neighbors pursue the common good right where they live. So, this is about you. We mean to equip and encourage you to pursue the common good where you live. And that's really important that we stress that, because this is not about us coming in and trying to make your neighborhood more hopeful. This is about you living into that vision that you have for yourself and for your own neighborhood, and just having us come along the way. So we are all about equipping and encouraging local people, which is what this class is all about. And one of the things I love it so much about it. So how do we do that? We have a lot of tools and resources, but they all fall within kind of this 3-step process or 3-step framework. And that's how our classes have been structured as well. So the first is discovering the gifts. The second is imagining the possibilities. And the third is pursuing the common good. That is all based on the foundation of asset-based community development. That is likely for many of you very common terminology, because I think we talk about it in this class a lot. But just in case it's a new term to you, if you're new to this, asset-based community development is all about pursuing community and neighborhood revitalization by focusing on what is strong instead of what is wrong. So sometimes it's helpful for me to think what would be the opposite of asset-based, and that is deficit-based community development. So before the 70s, that's really what community development was all about. Other people would go into a neighborhood, community developers would go into a neighborhood and say, let's make a list of the problems and see what we could do about them. And asset-based community development kind of came along and flipped the script on that to say, what if we started right in the neighborhood and figured out who are the local leaders and what are they good at and what are the assets in the neighborhood? And that's the foundation that we built on in Hopeful Neighborhood Project as well. And so let's just kind of break down these classes, which went right along with our 3 gifts. So what is discovering the gifts? What do we even mean by that? Well, you could use the word assets as well. We use the word gifts because we like not only the idea that it's something we probably didn't deserve in our neighborhood. We just moved where we moved, but we also like the idea that gifts are meant for sharing, right? Gifts I do buy gifts for myself sometimes, but typically when I buy a gift, it's meant to be given. And so we liked the idea that gifts are a communal and a shared kind of thing. And so we call the assets in our neighborhood gifts. And we believe that there are 2 kinds of gifts in your neighborhood that you should be very aware of. The first is individual gifts, the people in your neighborhood and the gifts that they have and they bring. That's you, that's your neighbors. And the second is the neighborhood gifts, the actual things, the shared things in your neighborhood that are unique and special just to that geographical place of your neighborhood. And so the best way to kind of figure out what your what the gifts are in your neighborhood is by actually to kind of make a map of them. And this is misleading to some who aren't used to asset-based community development. They think I'm going to pull up an actual physical map. And while those can be very helpful in asset mapping, there's actually a lot of gifts in your neighborhood that aren't necessarily captured on Google Maps or the old maps, that you unfold or whatever, that I love so much. So this map isn't a geographical map, but it's a way of visualizing all of the gifts in your neighborhood. So if you were in the first class with us, you had this handout. If you weren't in the first class with us, you can get this handout either on our website, or I believe, David, you sent a link for people to get the handouts. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did
Yeah,
earlier. I'm not sure it went out yesterday, but it has previously, but I can
yeah,
double check to make sure it's included.
No, it's fine. I know I saw it. I can't remember if it was yesterday or earlier in the week, but you have access to it in a couple of ways. I will write in the chat when I'm done talking because I can't do two things at once. It's hopefulneighborhood.org/HMP-downloads, and you can get all of our handouts at that link. You can get them in other ways on our website, but that's the place where we all have them, like for people who are part of our presentation. So I'll type that in a minute. But anyway, that is how you get this gift map. And there's 6 types of neighborhood gifts, and I'll just go through them really quickly here. There's group gifts. Those are gifts like you see in our map here in our example, senior citizens, dog owners. Those are kind of loose associations or groups of people. If you live on the hill in St. Louis, you might put like Italian immigrants. They're different kind of associational gift or group gifts in your neighborhood. I live out across from a middle school, so although there's lots of children in our neighborhood, I think of middle schoolers as a unique gift to our neighborhood because they're very visible because they walk back and forth all the time. So we definitely know who all the middle school students are in our neighborhood. So just kind of a loose group of people in your neighborhood is a gift and something that you could note so that you can build on it in the future. Physical gifts, people never have trouble thinking of what these are. Community gardens, parks, sidewalks, things you can actually see, vegetation, a great mural. Those are all physical gifts. Associational gifts, those are more formal associations of people, not necessarily super formal. City Heights Garden Club, we have a mom's Facebook group, or formal like American Legion, maybe book clubs. Those are kind of associational gifts that you could write down in your neighborhood. And I forgot to mention there's 2 rings on this map for a reason. So the first ring is where you go in and you write down gifts that you just think of that just come to mind. And the second ring is where you write gifts that you find out after you start this process. So those are, you go and ask people, what are some of the gifts? We call that reconnaissance, and then research. So we say there's 3 R's: recall, reconnaissance, and research when you're trying to figure out what are the gifts in your neighborhood. Private sector gifts, those are businesses. This is where the reconnaissance can be really helpful because there might be some hidden businesses in your neighborhood, like a home daycare or a construction business that's out of a home that really could be helpful when you go to plan like a neighborhood picnic or something like that. Those kind of assets are really important to write down and know about. Public sector gifts, these are your services. Here's where I always get a question when people are doing this here is they're like, well, I mean, we have mail in our neighborhood, but I can't walk to the post office. I also get this question when I'm thinking, when we're talking about businesses, because of how zoning works in America. A lot of times our businesses are in one district and our homes are in another district. If you're in an urban setting or a really small town, that might not be the case, but that's the case for many of our neighborhoods. And so what I say is loosely, if it's like perfect weather and I had all the time in the world and I could walk there, and then I count that as like a business in my neighborhood because it's not actually in the boundaries of my neighborhood, but the QT like across the street and down the corner, I count that. Or there's a little like a strip mall that I could again walk to on a really nice day with all the time in the world. I could walk there. So you can kind of expand that a little bit. If you think of it in terms of your neighborhood, when the question comes up, just write it down. This isn't about excluding or is there wrong answers to this. It's really about capturing every gift that you could think of that you could utilize that's local to you. And nonprofit gifts is our last one. So nonprofit gifts, those are maybe food pantries, maybe services that are out there for people. Maybe somebody works in a nonprofit, and so you're kind of connected in that way. Again, that goal isn't to get everything in the right category. The goal is to get everything on the map. So also don't get too caught up about these categories. Like, is the library actually a physical gift, or is that it doesn't matter. And sometimes things will show up a couple of times. So like a church, for example, might show up a couple of times. They have rooms that you can use, so they could show up as a physical gift. They have a volunteer group that you could utilize, so they'll show up as an associational gift. You can have them come up and the same kind of thing show up in a couple of different ways. So without any, I don't want to take too much time on this, but that is gifts. Now there's one really valuable gift that I didn't put on there, and you might get the hint based on looking at this map, that is your neighbors. So when you're all finished, we do have some tools for actually assessing the gifts of the people in your neighborhood, or writing those down and thinking about their individual gifts. But for the purpose of this class, we didn't take the time to do that. But I wouldn't want to have a map that didn't have any people represented, because as I was talking to someone the other day, I said a neighborhood without neighbors is just a collection of houses. And that's really stuck with me. That really, to make a neighborhood, you have to have neighbors. So don't finish this map without writing a bunch of people on it, of people who make your neighborhood what it is. And that's what we mean by discover the gifts. All right, let me keep moving on. I'm going to move on from that. Sorry, because I feel like I'm running out of time. Imagine the possibilities. So that is the next step. And this is kind of a two-part step, imagining the possibilities. Before we really get to that activity of imagining the possibilities, we really have to think about neighborhood well-being. And I'll explain why in a minute, but let me just define neighborhood well-being. And we define it in this with this window. We kind of assess it with this window. So neighborhood well-being, in my mind, is much like physical well-being, and the fact that it's not just one-dimensional. So I can be a very healthy person physically, but maybe I have some issues in my relationships, or I feel sad a lot, or I have other things going on that would impact my overall health. And so neighborhoods are the same way. And again, we have a whole teaching and videos and on all this, so I'm not going to go into much detail, but I just wanted to point out, if you weren't in the class on well-being, that this is an important part of sort of assessing and opening your mind up to possibilities in your neighborhood. So our first quadrant is people. Physical, emotional, and intellectual health of the people in your neighborhood are an indicator of health and well-being in your neighborhood. Social, cultural, and vocational health, environmental health, so natural, infrastructural, residential health, all of those are important, as well as the systems, political, economical, associational systems in your neighborhood. And there we go. We measure those with a survey. And so that's, we'd find that at any of the places where we have handouts. You can actually survey yourself. You can do this, and then you could pass this out to your neighbors and collect those results. And again, I could help you if you're interested in learning more about that, but that's how we assess neighborhood well-being. And we do that because it really, opens up the possibilities. So when we're thinking about all the gifts in our neighborhood, we want to also really understand the health of our neighborhood, because understanding all the aspects of health helps us think about, well, how could we use that group of retired teachers that we have, or how could we use this building to impact, the area of intellectual health, or whatever. It really kind of opens up those possibilities. Now, the danger here, when you're assessing neighborhood health, is you start to focus on the problems of oh, we're not healthy in this area. So resist that danger, because remember, we're focused on what is strong, not what is wrong. And that's why this second step to well-being is so important, of actually focusing on the possibilities for improving health. So you might come up with an idea that improves the healthiest part of your neighborhood. And I always say, you can always get healthier. So if I run half marathons, which I do not, but if I did, I would consider myself pretty healthy, but I could always stretch that to a full marathon, right? I could always get healthier. So don't limit yourself in possibility. David's laughing. He knows I would not run. So don't limit yourself to okay, well, now I know we're low in this area of health, we should focus on that. Don't limit yourself to that. But lots of times the possibilities will focus around there and give you an idea for that. But really, it's just about understanding how the possibilities and pursuing the common good, what that does, can increase any area of health. Make sense?
So basically, you're saying start a running club in your neighborhood. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I'm saying there could be groups like that. That'd be fantastic. And I will sit in my porch and cheer for you. I went to every cross-country meet in high school. I did not run. I was a cheering squad. All right. So how would you figure out possibilities in your neighborhood, right? How do you put all this together? That is imagining the possibilities. And we do that with this tool called the possibility statements. And so this is a tool, again, we have a handout for this and it has multiple statements here. And the idea is, this isn't quite like Mad Libs because you really should put some thought into each of these and how they work together, but we kind of gave you a structure to put some for your brainstorming. And so what we start with is, in order to positively affect our neighborhood's whatever well-being category, we could pursue, then you put an idea there and what it would utilize: gifts of the individuals and gifts of the neighborhood. And so I'm going to show you what that can look like. So here's some examples. In order to positively affect our neighborhood's social and intellectual health, our team could pursue holding a kids' baking class, utilizing Michael and Mel's baking skills, Melissa's teaching skills, and Ashley's ability to coordinate. So remember all those names you wrote in the middle. If you had the time and space, you'd be writing something like Ashley, organized, Michael and Mel, own a bake shop, Melissa, former teacher. And then when you looked at that and then you were like, oh, look, there's a VFW hall and the physical gifts, and look at all the restaurants that are in those public sector gifts. And you'd get this idea of, I wonder if we could put all those together to increase the intellectual and social health of our neighborhood. Social health by bringing people together, intellectual health by teaching these kids a skill that they're not, maybe they're not getting, or that you just want to increase their skills in that area. So that's how possibility statements work. Now, like with any brainstorming, we don't want you to have just one, because there's once you get started, you get more and more ideas. And again, remember that asset-based community development is about starting local and including people, doing things with and not for. And so we love people to come up with possibility statements. And when we do this in a group setting, we break up into small groups, come up with a bunch of statements, and then we actually give little heart stickers and people vote on which things they might want to do in a neighborhood. You could do that, in your own neighborhood, just on your own as well. Come up with 5 or 10 statements with 2 or 3 of you, narrow down amongst you to be like the top 2 or the top 3, and then walk around and say, hey, would you rather have a kids baking class, or would you rather us start a monthly newsletter? And then you'd see which things your neighbors would feel most engaged in. And then that would give you information on what actually to do to pursue the common good together. And so as I finish this up, if you want to start writing down some possibility statements, feel free. Otherwise, I just encourage you and challenge you to do this in your free time. If you've done these other classes, take those 2 pieces of information and spend some time writing some possibility statements. It's more fun than it sounds, I promise, and it won't take long. You could do this in 10 or 15 minutes probably. You could make a running list and just think about it for a week. And every time something comes to you, you write it down and then start, sharing it around and getting other people's ideas and input. So that's what we do with possibility statements. And once you have those statements and you've narrowed them down to 1 or 2 ideas, it comes time to pursue the common good. Because here's what happens with a lot of brainstorming sessions is it stops with the dream. and a lot of times when people get together, that's what it stops with. You do a nice SWOT analysis at work and then it just stops. Because without a plan to actually do it, it just stays a great dream on paper and doesn't actually impact the health of your neighborhood. So our final step in pursuing the common good is to actually pursue those possibilities, actually do a thing. Don't just sit there with that knowledge of how many great gifts you have. Do something with them. Once again, why we chose the word for gifts, because they're meant to be shared. They're meant to be active. Gifting is an action. And so we came up with this little document called our neighborhood action plan. Now, do you need this to create a plan? You absolutely do not. This is just offered as a tool, but it has some helpful pieces in it. So on this first page, you start with that possibility statement, and then you actually write a bigger description of the project. So instead of just kids baking class, it might be, you might say this is for ages, 6 through 10, and we're actually needing this kind of, we're going to get not only the baking supplies, but we're also going to get the equipment, and you have a little bit more project description in there. And how you're going to advertise it. We're going to work together with the school to get this flyer out, just a little bit more description. And then you put outcomes. This is not something familiar to a lot of people, but the people who wrote the Hopeful Neighborhood Project happen to have PhDs in education, not me. And they really like outcomes. And whenever I sit down to write outcomes, I'm like, oh, wow, this is hard, even though I have a background in teaching. But it is critical, because let me tell you what happens when we're coaching neighborhoods and they have great ideas. They jump to the kids' baking class and they're like, okay, now we've got the flour and the sugar and we've got this and this and this. And they forget that their overall outcome was to increase social connection. And so they actually make this whole plan and they forget to put in that the kids are going to talk to each other, And so having the outcomes, the overall outcome, is really important to think of at the beginning, so you don't get so deep into the details, you forget why you're doing it in the first place. So these don't have to be PhD level outcomes, but I would make sure you spend time thinking of a couple of the outcomes that you actually want at the end, before you get too far into the planning, so that when you are in the planning, you're like, and we need to, schedule time to eat and chat at the end of the kids' baking class, because social health was one of our outcomes. Or actually, making sure that the parents know each other so that they can encourage these friendships in the kids. So we're going to, do something to get parents connected through this class. So just a few outcomes are important to write down so you don't lose sight of your overall goals. We developed a way to kind of write down teams, because if you're doing this in a group, you get these possibility statements. You don't have a lot of time to do all the details, but if you break in a small group of teams, that usually gets most projects done. So we put that as a tool in here, and then your actual plan. And again, you can use any tools that work for you. Here's our overall tips that this plan is to help you kind of get to. And one of those is to have designated leaders. So that's where the teams really get. When you leave any kind of group meeting with your, idea and you need a plan, you need to make sure there's a couple people who are taking responsibility for moving that forward. Could be a couple people on the team. It could be one designated person, but make sure you don't leave with any kind of meeting without saying who's doing the next thing, a designated leader or leaders in some way. Making sure you have objectives. The possibility statements do give you a little head start on that, because you've already written what health indicators that you want. So that's obviously some of your objectives. And so that's a little hint for you. And you can have a few more key objectives, but don't get too many, or it's hard to accomplish in one project. Make sure you put in some key dates and milestones, so that if you're just going to do it in the future and Sally is going to lead it, then Sally is a volunteer just like all of us. And so she's going to keep trying to get to it. Don't worry, I'll get to that next week. So make sure when you're writing that project description, we're going to have a kids baking class after the kids get back to school and into the routine in October, which means we need to have the publicity out by September, and have a few key dates and milestones for each of those teams to be working on, so that it doesn't just keep getting pushed out into the future. And then it's really important in your plan to make sure you've identified in those tasks some key stakeholders. So we want to have this, we want to publish this through we want to put out a flyer at the school. We need to make sure that the school is okay with that. We need to make sure that the principal's on board with our key objectives here, or whoever those key stakeholders might be. And that is how you pursue the common good in your neighborhood. So just a little bit, if you're like, I really would like to know more, how do I do this? There's 2 easy ways to bring all this to your neighborhood. Well, there's 3. Number 1, go back and look at all the classes in Neighboring 101 and keep joining us here. Number 2 is you can do all these courses on your own with your neighbors. There's times that tell you how to incorporate your neighbors into the process at Hopeful Neighborhood courses, or you can invite us into your neighborhood to lead a lab. So that's a group of people that are all coming together. We have a couple different facilitators. I'm one of them, and so is David Burton, as well as some other people in various areas who can lead your neighborhood through this whole process in a few hours setting. And David,
Wow.
I'm done.
That was great. And if people have questions, please chime in. We want to hear your questions. I thought your tips at the end were really, really excellent and important. And it may just be me. I kind of find the process of coming up with an idea of something to do like the easy part. The hard part is finding other neighbors who want to take on a leadership role or really have a stake in this event. But you have to have that, or otherwise you're just you're not going to have the same level of impact. You're just kind of doing it on your own.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
other people may see that as the easy part. I don't know, but
well, let me say it is one of, and I might have said this in the first class, but I think it bears saying again, it's one of the real values of starting with the gifts. Because when I sit in here and come up with an idea, or a small group of people do, let's say I don't mean to throw my children's new school under the bus, but this is a very recent example of, I really wanted to get involved because, it's a new school and I want to get to know the other parents. And so I kept showing up at these meetings where they had all the plans made and they just need volunteers to do this one thing. And it's nothing I was good at. It's just, I can't help there. It was like torture. Please go hand these out to all the local businesses is like asking me to stick a fork in my hand. It's a really hard thing for me to do. and so I would just, be like, oh, maybe next time. And I'd show up again and there's just nothing I was good at. If they would have said, oh, look, you have a background in education. Would you come and help us host the Valentine's Day party? I would have been all over that. I would have been there. I would have been planning ahead. I would have been excited about it because that's my gift. And so when you start these ideas with giftedness, it is so much easier to pull people in because you're not asking them to do something that's hard for them. You're asking them to do something that they enjoy doing. It's just fun for them because it's their gift.
yeah.
Easy. They're like, why wouldn't everyone want to go host a kid's Valentine party? And I'm going to guess some of you are like, that would be like stick a fork in my hand. And you're like, why would passing out flyers at a business be hard? That's so easy, Jennifer. It's all about our giftedness, right? And so when you start with that, it's still difficult, which is why the other tips are important, like to hold people accountable sometimes because people are busy and they forget things and whatever. But when you start with their gifts, it really does give you a leg up on getting them involved.
Well, this is a great time if you have questions of Jennifer. This is also a time if you're wanting to use chat, maybe type in your idea that you're going to pursue. If you want to use that same format, maybe you already have something you're working on. We'd love to see it and maybe be able to discuss it, but we'll open the floor to questions as well. Just take yourself off mute and let the questions fly. That's your invitation to participate.
Oh, a senior citizen prom. I love that.
Oh, that's sweet. Those are moments made for Facebook Reels and Twitter and heart-tugging moments for sure. How cute. Any questions for Jennifer on this process? This is a good opportunity to ask for ideas or ask for clarification.
A great example, David, in the chat. I love your dual coffee makers.
The sad part of this is I don't drink coffee, Jennifer. So I
Really
think you, I
appreciate
think,
it.
I think you already know that from about me. So it's not really about the coffee. It's about the connections,
Yep. Yep.
right? So I have other neighbors who are very passionate about coffee, including my wife. So we went with their giftedness
Yep.
and went with it.
Okay, so I'll ask a question. So I'm kind of thinking about using some of the structure as a way to pull parents into the school that I teach in. And
Good to see you, by the way.
um, and actually this year, because of the work we've been doing to reach out to families, I have had about 50 forms sent back with parents showing interest in volunteering. And it's a little overwhelming because I have so many other things going on to get it started. And I was kind of thinking of maybe because on the form it indicates not necessarily a gift, but it indicates like an area that they might want to volunteer. And at first I was kind of thinking about breaking those areas into like little groups and then meeting with each of those groups. But now I'm kind of wondering if it wouldn't be better just to invite the whole group that showed interest and then maybe go through some of this, like learning their gifts on a smaller scale, because I think that would scare off some of these people. But and then from there, see what maybe they would be interested in doing with what we have planned out. Which do you think would be a better like approach to getting people to actually start doing some of the work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because then, like you said, you've got to factor in your time and what they'll be willing to come to. But I think, pulling them all together in one meeting just so you get to know them better and maybe doing some kind of like, brainstorming, maybe a revised version of possibility statements, like, here's all the areas that you're interested in volunteering in. Here's kind of some of the spaces I'd been thinking of. What are some ideas that you have? That could be a generative kind of process. It would be a little adaptation of this, but maybe use some of those key principles. And you'd also in that way be able to identify who those leaders might be, which is probably the first step of what you need to do with 50 people is figure out who among them can get other people involved and organize them and whatever. And so bringing them all together could be a way to do that. I think that might be wise.
Thanks.
And people 50 with making a commitment on the form, which is awesome. That's a great start. Doesn't translate into 50 showing up for a meeting, of course, right? So although you could do 2 different sessions at 2 different times or something to try and catch as many as you could, but
that's a good idea too.
Kind of fleshing out their giftedness. There's no telling what can show up from that. As Jennifer's saying, it's when you start looking at what people's interests are around you, you're likely to go in directions that weren't really on your radar because it's not part of your giftedness yourself.
And
that's really encouraging. That's an encouraging sign, Nicole.
Oh, I mean, that's huge. We've never had a response like that. So I think I think it's showing that the work we're doing to engage them is paying off. Now we've got to start shifting to getting them to do some of the work,
Yeah. Oh, we had an idea from one of our groups. They had a group of leaders within a community, and they were hosting a backpack kind of back to school. They gave away backpacks, but they did other things in this back to school. And so they decided, they'd really like to know the people better, but they weren't sure how to get to know their gifts in kind of that kind of setting. And so they were going to set up a station in the setting where people would write down their gifts and then with their name and then just kind of put it on a board, like in categories or something. So it's almost gamification in a non-technical way of writing the gifts down, just to kind of lower the barrier of that, but still to get that information out there. So it's a little less weird than like, hi, my name is Jennifer and I'm good at. So you could do something like that when you brought them together, is just set up a way to get to know them a little bit more individually, maybe give them some choices or and give them another category, but it'd be a way to get a little deeper in those areas that they wanted to volunteer in as well. And that's, I feel like, a good tip for any of you who are listening, who are like, yeah, it'd be really great to know. A lot of you I know are community leaders. So you might be gathering your community in different ways and like, well, how would I incorporate this in an easy way that doesn't require like door to door? Thinking about, something like that at your next event could be a way that you just start getting and gathering more data about the people who you're interacting with in your neighborhood.
And be sure to allow enough time for that. Jennifer, we've seen this on ones we've done together. I think of the one in Nixa, for example, and but I've seen it elsewhere as well. We are so used to seeing the problems that when you ask someone about the gifts or the talents in their area, people struggle with that sometimes. I think it takes a while to get that kind of going, thinking through what those, because it's lots of times it's things that maybe they walk past every day and they absolutely just take it for granted. And so it takes a little time to flesh that out sometimes. And I think I think that's probably the case for our own giftedness. If it's something we enjoy doing and we do regularly, we may not even think of it as being a gift or something of value to a group.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, any other questions for Jennifer? So we do have one comment in the chat here. Peggy's having a ladies neighborhood group that has been identifying individual gifts and who might be interested in certain activities, which might be interested in certain activities much easier, I think, might be making. It's become a social rather than just being asked to volunteer.
Yeah, which is really powerful. And I think, sometimes we do get so caught up in like pursuing the common good is about service. And while that can be true, a group of people who are connected to their neighborhood socially increases neighborhood health. Like that absolutely is an indicator of neighborhood health. You have that many people who are now connected together. And when there's a natural disaster, you've got a group of people who might have been meeting socially before, but now they're there for each other because they're connected. They're not lonely anymore because they're connected. If they need something, they know who to ask. Like, I'm sick and I can't make it to the pharmacy. Can you pick that up for me? And so I love that. And I think sometimes we're like, now we need to just get them to do something. Maybe not. Maybe just like encouraging that gift is just what you've done, Peggy. And I love that so much.
I've got kind of a similar funny example. I was working on a column here recently and following up on some of the many grants that we gave out in 2022 to neighborhoods and individuals to pursue projects. And I think we ended up funding everything that was requested, and some were bigger than others. And one of the ones we debated because it was small and it was a little unusual was a lady had submitted a grant proposal to fund materials that she needed to start a bunco club in her home among the women on her street. I don't know if any of you play bunco. I've never played bunco. Apparently, it must really be a fun game because people either, if they play it, they love it. And and so pardon me. So I checked back in with her, and here 2 years later, now she has 12 ladies that meet weekly at her home to play bunco. And this summer, those ladies organized a 4th of July parade for the kids in the neighborhood.
Oh, amazing.
So here we are 2 years down the street. We've gone from using bunco to get acquainted to now, regular weekly interaction, and now actually doing things for the neighborhood as a group. So
that's amazing.
That was a small investment for a really big outcome.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. I love that story.
And so the neat thing about some of these ideas are these all fit in really, really well with National Good Neighbor Day and Missouri Good Neighbor Week. National Good Neighbor Day, September 28th. Missouri Good Neighbor Week begins on September 28th, runs to October 4th. We've got libraries and cities and counties and individuals involved in that. And we'd love to hear some of your ideas or plans about what you're planning for that special day or what you'd hope to accomplish, and a way you're going to try and connect with your neighbors, just as a way to encourage or maybe a way to offer suggestions for other ideas. So anyone already have anything planned for that day or week, depending on where you're located, right?
April in St. Louis, they adopted October for our National Night Out month because it's so hot here in August.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Okay.
October 3rd is our national night out. So it's perfect. It fits right in with the the neighbor week. And so last year we did this. We had a huge neighborhood national night out, which was different from what they've ever had. It's usually like your street, you do it on your block. But we have 5 locations in the neighborhood to encourage people to come out. We had hundreds of people come out. One man said he hadn't been to a national night out in over 30 years. And so he was so happy to see people come out for it. And this year, we only have to do one location because people have like picked up the baton and they're having it on their blocks again. And that was the whole goal. I said, we need people who want to come out, but just don't know how or don't know what to do to see what we're doing and pick it back up and start doing it. And this year, that's what we're getting. So I was so happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. April's not going to tell this on herself, but I've seen a video. I've seen several things recently with her picture in it about the We Collaborate movement there in the West End of St. Louis. I've just put a link to an article that has April's bright smiling face right there at the front of that article. And so you guys are really, putting action into words and living that out and having really great results and great impacts on the West End. I'm so excited for you, and your enthusiasm is obviously bubbling over to others, and you've got a great team of people that are working together and exciting things ahead, it looks like.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Peggy's playing some chalk art on sidewalks, celebrating community or neighborhood. Yeah.
I love it.
Painting some fire hydrants, water department. Those are great ideas, big and small. There's no right or wrong answer to this question, of course, how you celebrate neighbors and neighboring in your community. It can be big and small. City of Springfield's working with KY3 and has organized 5 events in different city parks over the course of that week with speakers and music and food, and they're planning for about 500 people per event. So that's a big way to go about it. And the promotions are all about steps you need to take to become an engaged neighbor. And there's a lot of promotional effort behind that. So that's a huge win for Missouri Good Neighbor Week. But it may also be that you've moved to an area and you don't know the people that live around you. It may just be some of your famous homemade cookies and a knock on the door. That's appropriate as well.
I think I say this a lot about last year, the Missouri Good Neighbor Week, and particularly Missouri, the nomination for Engaged Neighbors in Missouri. And one of the things that impressed me so much is how many nominations we got for the man who walks around every day and brings the newspaper up to the front door of neighbors who can't walk that way. And it seems insignificant, I'm sure, to the man walking, right? He just takes 2 steps out of his way and takes it up. But that, going in and nominating a neighbor on a form, on a computer or a phone is kind of a big step for a lot of people. And multiple people thought that was so significant that they nominated people who are doing similar types of things. And that just really impressed me, because that's really how you can impact. I believe truly the world would change if everyone was just like taking their had the forethought to think that person needs their newspaper up to the front step, and so really do encourage, if you don't have a big plan, have a small plan, just connect with a couple of neighbors. If you don't know them, get get to know them. If you do know them, relationships still take nurturing, right? And use September 28th as an opportunity to nurture some of those relationships with your neighbors. Just reminding them, hey, I really appreciate that you're my neighbor. It's National Good Neighbor Day and you're a great one. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to celebrate the holidays. So if you have no other plans, I encourage you to do that.
Yeah, who doesn't love to receive a little encouragement, right?
Yeah.
I think we had more than one from nomination for someone who every week pulls that person's trash container back up to their
Right.
house and stuff, which likewise, it's a pretty simple act, but it's something that saves some older people some steps, and it seems to, obviously they have to stop and take time to do that. They're thinking about that person when they do it. So
Yeah. And in terms of, like we've got a new HOA in place here in my neighborhood, and they are doing their job well. I am so appreciative of them, but also that means that doing their job well, they're enforcing some in compliance that hasn't been enforced for a while, like trash cans on the street. And so, it brought to my mind what a big deal that actually is to the whole neighborhood. Those simple acts, they don't just help that neighbor, but they help the whole neighborhood. They help the people who are trying to create a space that looks nice to those driving by. They're trying to, make those little tiny acts of connecting together and doing small things add up to really serving your whole neighborhood in ways that I think sometimes we don't realize.
yeah. Will anyone else have plans for Missouri Good Neighbor Week, or an idea that they'd like some input on?
I'm going to look at these forms and start using them because I love it. I love thinking about the gifts, in the community and making a map. And, I love that. I think that would help us, be more focused, on what we're doing and what we're planning. So I'm definitely going to use them.
Awesome. Well, I'm here in St. Louis as well, April. So if you ever need anything, I'm here for anybody, but I'm actually local for you. So
okay, good. Yeah.
So reach out anytime.
Well,
Okay,
Jennifer, you and April have something else in common. April's a graduate of Neighborhood Leadership Academy.
I actually thought I recognized April from Neighborhood Leadership Academy, but I wasn't certain. So
and Nicole Park is in Neighborhood Leadership Academy this year.
Oh,
and
in for a treat, Nicole.
Some others. So great connections here. Well, if people don't have any other ideas, let me just kind of end on this note. I think I was thinking about this recently for another project I was working on, and you may remember this song. The songwriter's name was Kurt Kaiser. I think it was written in the 70s, but I was a child of the 80s, so I guess that's when I got familiar with it. And it was called Pass It On. And one of the lines in the song that you may recognize, it only takes a spark to get a fire going. And so really what we're talking about for Missouri Good Neighbor Week and National Good Neighbor Day is this opportunity for you to be a spark in your neighborhood, a spark for those people that live around you that are neighbors. And I just think about people in the Springfield area maybe that I've met in the last year that have been sparks. I think of Alyssa that lives in downtown Springfield, who didn't like the fact that there was nothing green and growing downtown. And she talked to the owner of a vacant lot into letting her plant the lot in sunflowers. And she got volunteers that would come and tend the soil and water it. And then by fall, there's this lot of sunflowers in downtown Springfield, of all places. And people stop and take pictures, and it brings joy and color to the area. But she took a risk to do that. She was a spark to get something going that impacted the neighborhood. I think of Sandy, who was a spark on getting a bunco club going, of all things. I think of Carolyn that lives in the 55 and older community, and she was a spark in that she applied for a grant, took some of the materials, built some raised bed gardens at her apartment complex, and now that has become like a destination for their community. People go for walks there. She says people come out there and pick fresh vegetables. They've gotten acquainted. They've developed new relationships. People have volunteered to tend it and stuff. They've had to add more raised beds because it's become so popular, but it's become a connection point because of her taking the effort to be a spark there in her community. And then this week I was down in Houston, Missouri. One of my favorite sparks down there is Sherry McAllister that does the roses in the community. You can come and pick up 12 roses from her. You keep one for yourself. You hand away the other 11 that are all individually wrapped. You give them away to your neighbors. And this town of 2,200 population, they give away 3,000 roses on National Good Neighbor Day. And she's expanded that through the whole county. Her goal now this year is 5,000 roses. And but she's a spark, and she's got volunteers working on that endlessly. So those are all big and small ways, but each of us has within us the ability to be a spark in our neighborhood. And when you're a spark, you know, it only takes a spark to get the fire going. So that's my encouragement to you this year with National Good Neighbor Day and Missouri Good Neighbor Week. Go be a spark. All right.
Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you for your words of wisdom and teaching today. And
my pleasure. Thank you.
And those 20 that joined us online today live, we appreciate having you all live. Look forward to being in touch again.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy Good Neighbor Week.
Take care.
Bye.